What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be comparing the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2022 to the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G. So let's get started. So with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting a 6.8-inch IPS LCD display with a 120Hz refresh rate, a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 395, an aspect ratio of 20.5:9, and an 85.8% screen-to-body ratio. With the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, we're getting a 6.5-inch TFT display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of about 81.6%. So for what they are, both of these displays are really good, but I would say the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022 is quite a clear step up. First of all, it's much larger, as you can see here, and of course, with a larger display, you're going to get a much better experience when you're consuming content. And in addition to this, not only is the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022 quite a bit larger, but it also does have better dimensions, with an aspect ratio of 20.5:9 versus 20:9. The Moto G Stylus 5G has a taller and more narrow form factor, and this is going to give you a much more immersive experience when you're consuming content in landscape mode, for example. And when you're doing something like reading, you'll be able to fit more content on the screen without having to scroll as much. In addition to this, the Moto G Stylus 5G is going to have a much sharper image with a 1080p resolution versus 720p. Now that's not to say the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G looks bad per se, but again, between the two, the Moto G Stylus 5G is definitely a step up. And if that wasn't enough, with a 120Hz refresh rate, the Moto G Stylus 5G is also going to have faster and smoother movement on the screen, so when you're just navigating through the phone, it's going to feel a little bit more premium versus the standard 60Hz display, which again isn't really bad, but at the same time, it's not going to feel nearly as high end. And navigating through the phone in general is not the only thing this is going to affect. When you're doing anything with motion on the screen at all, whether you're streaming videos, playing games, pretty much anything, things are going to look better in general with the Moto G Stylus 5G. Now for storage, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting 256GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and with the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, we're getting 128GB with microSD card expansion as well. Now keep in mind though, with the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, this specific phone in this video is the international version, but if you get it through a US carrier, it's pretty likely that it's only going to have 64GB. Now the same could probably be said for the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022. This phone hasn't hit every carrier yet, but if you do end up getting it through a carrier, it is quite possible that they're only going to give you a 128GB variant, whereas this phone that I did get unlocked through Motorola itself does actually have 256. But for the sake of this video, with the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022, again, we're getting 256GB versus 128 with the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, and both of them do have microSD card expansion. Now honestly, for the average user, either of these phones is going to be perfectly fine, because unless you have a bunch of apps and photos and videos and stuff like that, you're really not even going to use up 128GB. But if you are really a power user and you have lots of photos and videos, stuff like that, and then apps that you don't want to put on a microSD card, in that situation, I could definitely see the Moto G Stylus 5G with double the storage having an advantage. Now for security features, both of these phones have a fingerprint scanner and face unlock, so it's nice to see that we're getting two options to unlock them. As far as the fingerprint scanner goes, they're located in the same spots right here on the power keys, so nice and convenient. So let's go ahead and give them a try and see how well they work. So starting with the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So real fast and responsive, no issues here. And moving on to the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G. There we go, one more time. So as you can see, it's not unlocking when the display is off, but when we turn it back on, it unlocks no problem. So as you can see there, both fingerprint scanners are real fast and responsive, no issues there. And again, both phones do also have face unlock, so if you want to use that instead, it's always an option. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022, we got a nice looking hole punch design for the front facing camera, and this camera is 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera that also doubles as a macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. With the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, we got a water drop notch for the front facing camera, and this camera is 13 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, and a 5 megapixel macro camera. Now for video recording, the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022 maxes out at 1080p at 60 frames per second in both the rear and front cameras. And with the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, you can shoot 4K at 30 frames per second in the rear camera and 1080p in the front. So in general, these phones do have pretty much the same features. Sure, the Moto G Stylus has a triple camera and the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G has a quad, but it's really the same features. Remember, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, the macro camera and the ultra-wide camera are combined into one, and it doesn't really change the functionality all that much. But that being said, as far as photo and video quality goes, I would say the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, despite being a year older, is still a little bit better. Now, that's not to say the Moto G Stylus 5G takes bad photos by any means. In fact, if you're just comparing photo to photo, the difference really isn't that noticeable. But I do think with the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, the colors are a little bit better, the details are sharper, and the images are just a tiny bit brighter. And in addition to this, the video quality is quite a bit better since this phone can record 4K videos, and the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022 can only record in 1080p. But that being said, we do at least get 60 frames per second with the Moto G Stylus 5G. So if you want to record slow motion videos or something like that, then it should still be fine. Now internally, with the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022, we're getting 8GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 695 5G processor. With the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, we're getting 6GB of RAM as well with the MediaTek Dimensity 720 5G processor. Now keep in mind, with the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, there are quite a few variants out there. There is a variant with 8GB of RAM and one that has 4 as well. And while this isn't going to make really a huge difference, it's definitely still something to keep in mind. But that being said, I did run Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on these phones, and with the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022, we're getting a single core score of 622 and a multi-core score of 1928. With the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, we're getting a single core score of 491 and a multi-core score of 1664. So as you can see here, there is a pretty noticeable difference in processing power, with the Moto G Stylus 5G being a little bit faster. Now that being said, while the difference is significant enough to actually pay attention to, it's still not really like night and day. It's not like the Moto G Stylus 5G is super fast and the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G is really slow. But if you're on your phone a lot and you're doing slightly higher end activities, like maybe a lot of mobile gaming, something like that, then I would say the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022 is probably going to be a better choice. But if you're not really using your phone super heavily, just doing more normal activities like social media, web browsing, stuff like that, then the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, while not being quite as fast as the Moto G Stylus 5G, is still going to get the job done perfectly fine. In addition to this really goes without saying, but as the names of both of these phones suggest, they do get 5G connectivity. So this is definitely a great thing if you want access to your carrier's 5G network and the latest and greatest technology, because while 4G is not going away anytime soon, I do personally still think it's a great idea in 2022 to get a 5G phone if you can. Now for the battery, with the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery that supports 15 watt fast charging. With the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery as well that also supports 15 watt fast charging. So pretty much the exact same specs here. Both of these phones have pretty much the largest battery you can get in a US smartphone. So you're going to get tons of battery life throughout the day, and then down the road as the batteries degrade, which all batteries do, you're not going to notice it nearly as soon as you would with a smaller battery like an iPhone, for example, because since you're already starting out with so much more battery life than you really need, you'll be able to keep the phone for a much longer period of time without having to replace it. In addition to this, the fast charging doesn't hurt either. While neither of these phones have the fastest fast charging out there, 15 watt fast charging is still pretty decent. And if you have a good fast charger or maybe a car charger, something like that, then it still will make a difference. Another nice thing about these phones is that both of them do have NFC, and in case you don't know what that is, NFC is the technology behind contactless mobile payment services like Google Pay, Samsung Pay, Apple Pay, all that. So if you do like to use those tap and pay features, then either of these phones will be perfectly fine. Now this is especially impressive with the Moto G Stylus 5G, because I do believe this is the first Moto G phone that actually does have NFC. For whatever reason, in their budget phones, Motorola ended up being a little late to the party, since pretty much every new Samsung phone in 2022 does have NFC already. But of course, better late than never, so I am glad to see that we are getting NFC with the Moto G Stylus 5G. Now, as the name of the phone suggests, one feature the Moto G Stylus 5G has that the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G doesn't is a stylus. So as you can see right here, we got a nice punch-out design. And as far as the actual use of the stylus goes, for a mid-range phone, it actually is decently sensitive. Now, you're not going to be doing any real art on this, but you can still take handwritten notes, stuff like that. And maybe if you're just navigating through the phone and playing games and stuff like that, it's probably going to get the job done perfectly fine. But again, if you want to do any real art or anything like that, you're probably going to be disappointed because again, while this stylus is pretty decent, it's not the most sensitive in the world, and it's certainly nowhere near the level of something like a Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra. And another nice thing about this stylus is it doesn't really get in the way or anything like that, so if you don't even want to use it, you really don't have to. I know there have been several mid-range phones in the past that do have styluses, and they kind of make the stylus the main gimmick of the phone, but with the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022, despite being literally named after the stylus, this phone is actually still a really good phone without even paying attention to the stylus. For that matter, I never use styluses, so a lot of the time when I'm covering this phone, I actually forget it even has one. So that really just goes to show that even though the stylus is there and it can be a really useful feature depending on how you actually use your phone, again, if you're not someone who likes to use styluses, then you don't even need to worry about it. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? In general, I would say in pretty much every way, the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2022 is quite a step up from the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G. First of all, the display is much better with a larger size, better dimensions, a higher resolution, and a higher refresh rate. If you're consuming a lot of content, you're going to get a much better experience with this phone than you would with the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G. In addition to this, no matter what variant of the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G you get, the Moto G Stylus 5G is going to have much more storage with 256 gigabytes versus 128 or 64. It's really no contest there, so if you're a power user and you have lots of photos and videos, apps, that kind of stuff, then this is definitely something to think about. And in addition to this, the Moto G Stylus 5G does have a stylus, and it has a much more powerful processor as well. Now, the one area where I do think the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G does have an advantage is the camera. Now, this isn't really a huge advantage when it comes to photos, because again, I do think the quality is pretty similar. Maybe the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G is just a tiny bit better, but where it really makes a difference is the videos. You can't record 4K videos with the Moto G Stylus 5G, but you can with the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G. For whatever reason, I don't really know why Motorola took that feature away. But if you do want to record higher resolution videos, then the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G will have an advantage there. But in general, despite the Moto G Stylus 5G being a better phone overall, I do think for being a phone that's over a year old, the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G still provides quite a bit of value for the money. Now, if you want to learn more about either of these phones individually, be sure to check out my full reviews and tips and tricks videos for them on the channel. But I hope you enjoyed this comparison, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. But as always, I will see you in the next video.